Welcome back to the Path to Peace Therapy podcast. I'm Stephanie Buckley, a parenting strategist and family systems coach specializing in ADHD, OCD, anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, and neurodivergent family dynamics. I have been married for over 3 decades and am the mother of a thriving 23-year-old neurodivergent son with ADHD, experiences that deeply inform both my personal and professional work. In addition to supporting families, I help athletes overcome mental blocks, regulate emotions under pressure, and build the psychological skills needed for consistent performance and long-term success. If you feel like you are parenting all day long and nothing is actually changing, this episode is for you. Many parents in ADHD households describe their lives as a constant cycle of reminding, explaining, negotiating, regulating, and repairing, only to wake up the next morning and start all over again. By the end of the day, there is often a deep sense of exhaustion paired with confusion. You were calm, you explained it clearly, you showed empathy, you held the boundary, and yet the same struggles keep showing up. When this happens repeatedly, parents begin to internalize the problem and assume they are doing something wrong. They wonder if they are too soft, too strict, inconsistent, or ineffective. But what if the issue is not your parenting at all? What if the real problem is that you are parenting inside a system that was never designed to support an ADHD nervous system? To elevate this conversation beyond surface-level advice, we have to bridge the gap between clinical neuropsychology and real-life parenting experience. This is advocacy in its truest form. Not advocacy that demands more effort from parents or more compliance from children, but advocacy that respects how the brain actually works. In this episode, we're going to explore what happens when the brain's top-down regulation system breaks down, why willpower and consequences fail in ADHD households, and how environmental scaffolding becomes the intervention that finally creates change. To understand why ADHD homes often feel like pressure cookers, we need to start with the prefrontal cortex, or PFC. In a neurotypical brain, the prefrontal cortex functions like a chief executive officer. It oversees executive functions such as response inhibition, working memory, sequencing, emotional regulation, planning, and follow-through. This is the part of the brain that allows a person to pause before reacting, hold multiple steps in mind, regulate frustration, and complete tasks even when they are boring or difficult. In the ADHD brain, however, this system develops more slowly and operates less efficiently, largely due to differences in dopamine signaling within the basal ganglia. Dopamine in this context is not about pleasure. It is about signaling importance, effort, and follow-through. When dopamine signaling is inconsistent, the brain struggles to initiate tasks, sustain effort, and regulate emotions under stress. This is why willpower fails. When a parent says, "I've told you 10 times to put your shoes on," they are appealing to the child's declarative memory, which is the ability to know and recall a rule. But ADHD is not a disorder of knowing. It is a disorder of doing at the point of performance. The child often knows exactly what is expected, agrees with the rule, and may even want to comply. The problem is that the neurological bridge between knowing and doing is unreliable. Under emotional or cognitive load, that bridge collapses. No amount of repeating, lecturing, or escalating consequences can rebuild it in the moment. This is why parents feel like nothing sticks, and why children often feel misunderstood and overwhelmed at the same time. When systems are missing, something very predictable happens inside families. The parent becomes the system. This is what I refer to as the executive assistant trap. In the absence of external structure, the parent inadvertently becomes the child's external prefrontal cortex. You are no longer just a parent. You become a biological prosthetic for executive functioning. You hold the working memory through constant reminders. You initiate tasks through nudging and prompting. You regulate emotions by soothing, de-escalating, and containing distress. Over time, this creates profound burnout. Many parents describe feeling cognitively fried by 4 o'clock in the afternoon. This is not because you are weak or doing it wrong. You are running 2 cognitive loads on one nervous system, and no human can sustain that without cost. Homework time offers a clear example of how this plays out. A child sits at the table staring at a worksheet. The parent has already tried to be supportive. Snacks have been offered, distractions removed, encouragement given, and then suddenly the child rips the paper, shuts down, or starts a fight about dinner. From the outside, this can look like defiance or avoidance. Clinically, what is happening is task initiation failure paired with emotional dysregulation, often described as the wall of awful. The task feels enormous because the brain cannot sequence or chunk the steps. The fear of making a mistake or not meeting expectations triggers a physiological fight or flight response. Cortisol rises, the nervous system becomes activated, and access to the prefrontal cortex goes offline. At that point, the child is not refusing to work. They are neurologically unable to engage. The intervention here is not to parent harder or argue about the importance of math. The intervention is environmental scaffolding. When time is externalized through a visual timer, an abstract demand becomes concrete and finite. When body doubling is used and a calm adult sits nearby doing a neutral task, the parent's regulated nervous system acts as a co-regulator. Cortisol levels decrease, the nervous system settles, and the prefrontal cortex can come back online. This is not rescuing. It is restoring access to neurological capacity. Mornings tell a similar story. Many parents describe mornings as a relentless remind-a-thon. Get dressed, brush your teeth, pack your bag. Even after hundreds of repetitions, the child stands frozen in the hallway with one sock on. This is not willful non-compliance. It is a deficit in working memory and sequencing. The ADHD brain struggles to hold multiple steps in active memory. Each new visual stimulus competes for attention. By the time the child reaches the bedroom to find socks, the instruction to pack the bag has already been overwritten by a stray Lego on the floor. The system collapses under cognitive load. The shift here is moving from verbal prompting to visual anchoring. A launchpad by the door externalizes memory. A checklist on the bathroom mirror replaces nagging with structure. When a step is missed, the parent does not interrogate or scold. Instead, they redirect to the system and ask, "What does the checklist say is next?" This preserves the parent-child relationship by making the system the authority rather than the parent. At this point, many parents worry that providing this level of structure means they are coddling their child. Clinically, this is where we differentiate between enabling and scaffolding. Enabling means doing for the child what they are capable of doing. Scaffolding means providing temporary external support while internal systems are still developing. Think of a skyscraper under construction. The scaffolding does not build the structure. It prevents collapse while the structure is unfinished. In ADHD, internal scaffolding is delayed, not defective. External systems allow the child to experience success. Success produces dopamine, and dopamine fuels future motivation. Independence grows from support, not pressure. Evenings require special attention because this is when decision fatigue is at its peak. By the end of the day, both the parent and the child have depleted regulatory reserves. This is where your nighttime system needs to be in place, which reduces stimulation and decision load. Dimming light supports melatonin production, which is often delayed in individuals with ADHD. Offering limited choices prevents decision paralysis. Preparing for the next morning through what I call a pre-flight check reduces the executive load of the following day by nearly 40%. When bags are packed and clothes are laid out, the system carries the weight instead of the nervous system. As systems become more robust, the parent's role begins to shift. You move from being a crisis manager, constantly reacting to problems, to a lead consultant who designs, observes, and refines systems. When a system fails, and it will, you do not blame the child's character. You debug the system. You ask where friction occurred, whether a step was too large, or whether a visual cue was missing. This is advocacy. It is respecting neurobiology rather than fighting it. When we talk about debugging the system, what we are really doing is learning to ask a different question. Instead of asking, why won't my child just do this? We begin asking, where is the barrier? For example, many parents expect their child to fill their water bottle each morning before school. On the surface, this seems like a simple, age-appropriate task. But if the water bottles are stored high in a cabinet, the cups are in a different drawer, the lid is hard to twist, or the child is already rushed and dysregulated, the environment itself becomes the obstacle. The failure isn't a lack of responsibility. The barrier is access, sequencing, and timing. Once you see that, the solution becomes obvious. Lower the bottles, pre-stage them on the counter, or fill them the night before. The behavior changes not because the child tried harder, but because the system stopped fighting the brain. This same principle applies across nearly every daily struggle in ADHD households. Parents may expect their child to put shoes on independently, but the shoes are scattered across multiple rooms, mixed with sports gear, or buried under backpacks. The barrier is not compliance, it is organization and visual clarity. Parents may expect homework to be completed after school, but the designated workspace is cluttered, noisy, or shared with siblings, making sustained attention neurologically unrealistic. The barrier is sensory overload. Parents may expect their child to remember to take medication in the morning, but the medication is stored out of sight in a cabinet, requiring the child to remember the task without any visual cue. The barrier is working memory, not motivation. Another common example involves packing lunches. A parent may expect their child to make their own lunch, yet the snacks are stored in different locations. The containers don't have matching lids, or the refrigerator is visually overwhelming. The barrier is decision fatigue and sequencing. Similarly, parents may expect their child to put dirty clothes in the laundry, but the hamper is upstairs, their bedroom is downstairs, or the hamper has clothes stacked on top of it, and it's difficult to open. The barrier is physical effort layered on top of executive demand. Parents may expect their child to start homework at a certain time, but that time comes immediately after a long school day without a transition, snack, or decompression period. The barrier is their nervous system exhaustion. Technology creates its own set of hidden barriers. Parents may expect their child to log off screens when time is up, but the transition is abrupt. The expectation is verbal only, and no external cue signals the shift. The barrier is transition management. Parents may expect their child to brush their teeth before bed, but the toothbrush is missing, the toothpaste is empty, or the bathroom lighting is harsh and overstimulating. The barrier is sensory discomfort and preparation, not refusal. In every one of these examples, the pattern is the same. When the environment is misaligned with the brain's capacity, behavior looks like defiance, avoidance, or laziness. When the barrier is removed, behavior improves with remarkably little effort. This is why systems-based parenting is so powerful. It replaces moral judgment with curiosity. It asks, what is making this hard? Rather than, why won't you do it? And that question alone changes everything for the parent, for the child, and for the relationship between them. When we say a place for everything and everything in its place, we are not talking about being overly tidy or obsessive. We are talking about neurological load management. For an ADHD brain, every misplaced item represents an additional executive demand. When objects do not have a consistent, visible home, the brain is forced to engage working memory, problem solving, and emotional regulation simultaneously just to complete a simple task. That cumulative load is exhausting, and over time it leads to avoidance, shutdown, or explosive behavior that gets misinterpreted as carelessness or opposition. From a neuropsychological perspective, consistent placement of items acts as an external memory system. It removes the need for the brain to remember where things go, which frees up cognitive resources for initiation and follow-through. When shoes always live in the same bin by the door, backpacks are always placed on the same hook, and chargers always stay in the same drawer, the environment does the remembering. The brain no longer has to search, decide, or problem solve under pressure. For children with ADHD, this external consistency compensates for working memory vulnerabilities and reduces the friction that often triggers emotional dysregulation. This principle also directly supports emotional regulation. When a child cannot find what they need, their stress response activates quickly. Cortisol rises, the prefrontal cortex goes offline, and the task that was once manageable suddenly feels impossible. What looks like a meltdown over missing shoes is often a nervous system responding to repeated micro-failures. A predictable environment reduces these micro-stressors before they accumulate. In other words, order in the environment creates calm in the nervous system, not because the child should be calm, but because the brain is no longer under constant threat of failure. Importantly, a place for everything must be accessible, logical, and visible to the child, not just aesthetically pleasing to the adult. If items are stored out of reach, behind doors, or in visually cluttered spaces, the system fails. ADHD systems work best when they are obvious, simple, and forgiving. Open bins outperform drawers. Labels outperform memory. Proximity beats perfection. The question is never, is this neat? But rather, does this reduce steps, decisions, and frustration? When families adopt this principle, something subtle but powerful happens relationally. Parents stop narrating every step, and children stop feeling constantly corrected. The environment becomes neutral and supportive rather than punitive. Instead of hearing, "Why can't you ever put your shoes away?" the child experiences success simply by moving through a system that makes sense to their brain. Over time, these repeated experiences of success build confidence, autonomy, and intrinsic motivation. The child is no longer fighting the environment or the parent. They are collaborating with a system that works for them. Ultimately, a place for everything and everything in its place is not about control. It is about respecting neurobiology. It is the recognition that independence is not taught through pressure, but through design. When the environment is structured to support the brain can finally do what it has been trying to do all along. If nothing has worked so far, it does not mean you failed. It means you were trying to solve a systems problem with tools designed for motivation and memory. That is not fair to you or to your child. This week, instead of changing everything, simply notice where you are acting as the system and ask what the environment could hold instead. That is where sustainable change begins. This episode is for educational purposes and to provide support. It is not a substitute for professional mental health evaluation, diagnosis, or treatment. The more we learn to recognize the signs behind the behaviors, the more compassion and support we can offer to our kids, our partners, and ourselves. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this episode was helpful, I'd love it if you shared it with a fellow parent, caregiver, or educator who might need it too. You can subscribe to stay up to date on future episodes and explore additional tools and resources at thepathttopeacetherapy.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at thepathttopeacetherapy. If you have questions or want to reach out directly, you can also shoot me an email at stephanieb@thepathttopeacetherapy.com. If you are in California, I offer virtual sessions if you are not in the Hermosa Beach and South Bay area, and you can book online through the Path to Peace Therapy. And as always, take a deep breath, give yourself some grace, and remember, peace is possible, and you don't have to do this alone.